Welcome to Series 8, exploring Pope St. John and Peace on Earth, published in 1963. It's Paul Medeiros coming to you today from city of New Bedford, near my residence. Let's first explore who Pope St. John was and a breakdown of Peace on Earth. Pope St. John was born in 1881. Pope St. John is our author bridging the 19th century with Alcott and Thoreau with the 20th century. Pope St. John was an acquaintance of John F. Kennedy, who was married in the city of Newport. In the biographies reader, there's a nice biography titled Pope St. John the 23rd, Beyond the Myths. And in that biography, we learn that Pope St. John was an engaging personality, a friend of everyone. And Pope St. John championed workers, the poor, and the living conditions of many people in the 20th century during the World Wars. Pope St. John was known as the People's Pope, a friend of the common people. Like Louisa May Alcott, Pope St. John served during the wars, and he was also a nurse who washed sheets and attended the wounded. According to the biography, Pope St. John served the church in international locations like Bulgaria and Greece and Turkey, and there he worked with persons of diverse religious backgrounds and churches. For Philosophy 225, Pope St. John will be our second champion of the moral life, the good life committed to self-conduct as a person and to some or all areas of belonging or shared life. I want to point out some valuable life statements in Peace on Earth. On page 7, Pope St. John writes, "Human beings have also the right to choose for themselves the kind of life which appeals to them, whether it is to found a family or to embrace the priesthood or the religious life." And at the very end of our readings for this week, Pope St. John writes on page 34, "The same law of nature that governs the life and conduct of individuals must also regulate the relations of political communities with one another." Let's review the learning objectives for our study of Peace on Earth and introduce ourselves to the whole document part by part. First, the learning objectives. First objective, to learn the concepts of rights, duties, and reciprocity taught in part 1 of Peace on Earth. To understand the importance of the common good for human life, according to Pope St. John. That's in part 2. And third, to examine Pope St. John's compatibilism between reason and faith. Okay, well, let's look now at the document, Peace on Earth. Above all, we ought to know Peace on Earth is an encyclical letter. I first learned about encyclical letters in 2015 and 16 with Providence College. There we were invited to read Laudato Si, the encyclical letter of Pope Francis. In that encyclical letter, there is a reference to this document, Peace on Earth. And that's how I learned about Peace on Earth. What is an encyclical letter? It is a document prepared by the Bishop of Rome, providing guidance, explanations, interpretations, rationale on matters of Catholic faith. This document is addressed to the other bishops, all of the church servants, and in some cases all of the Catholic world. In 1963, Pope St. John addressed Peace on Earth also to all persons of goodwill. In short, all of the world is invited to review this encyclical letter. We ought to mention the setting of this encyclical letter. In 1962, in 1963, many events are going on internationally. University students are protesting war in North America and in Europe. The arms race is becoming a significant problem. People are living in anxiety and fear throughout the earth. This is an important theme in all of our authors for the rest of the semester, all of whom were thinking and living in the 1960s. In October of 1962, 100 years after Luis M. Alcott went to the Civil War, the Cuban Missile Crisis alarmed North America. And also at this time, the space exploration had begun. There are two key arguments in Peace on Earth. Above all, the argument for a world government and the argument that nuclear weapons ought to be banned. For people in the 1960s and for today, these are significant arguments because an encyclical letter tells us what the Roman Catholic Church believes on these important social issues. Okay, let's now look at a part-by-part summary of the whole document. First, there's an introduction, and in that introduction, our author distinguishes two kinds of order evident in our reality, and he also provides his main conclusion, that we need a world government. In part 1, pages 3 through 18, titled Order Between Men, our author teaches as a vocabulary of terms, for example, rights and duties. In part 2, pages 18 through 34, titled Relations Between Individuals and Public Authorities, Pope St. John introduces the common good. He describes the importance of the common good and also the task of government to conduct the common good. Parts 3 through 6 are extra readings, and there are resources available on our web pages to read the rest of the document. And I recommend that for anybody interested in political philosophy or Catholic social thought. In part 3, pages 34 through 53, titled Relations Between States, our author takes the vocabulary and ideas taught in the first parts and applies them now to states or nations. And that's where our author talks about many important social issues today, such as nuclear weapons needing to be banned. In part 4, pages 53 through 60, titled The World Community, our author gives the argument for a world government. A world government is needed to solve our global issues, and Pope St. John proposes the United Nations as the best candidate for a world government. Part 5, the concluding section, pages 60 through 72, there are important statements about compatibilism between reason and faith. This part is titled Pastoral Exhortations, and here Pope St. John exhorts the Catholic faithful to pursue public service and to pursue expertise. And Pope St. John provides a promising vision of a integration of faith and reason and faith.